The drop out of hyperspace hit like a sledgehammer to the chest, and every alarm on the bridge screamed at the same time. My hands locked around the armrests of the captain's chair as the void outside the view screen turned from the swirling blur of transit space into a field of stars so dense they looked like spilled salt on black glass. Except those were not just stars. Half of them were moving. Half of them were warships. "We are inside the sovereignty ring," Sulo said from the navigation console, his voice flat and controlled in a way that told me he was terrified. "Dead center of Vorath Imperial space. Jump accuracy within 4 kilometers of target." 4 kilometers? In galactic terms, that was threading a needle from across the universe. I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding and looked at the tactical display. The ring was exactly what the old salvaged archives said it would be. A sphere of military installations, orbital fortresses, sensor platforms, and patrol fleets surrounding the Vorath throne world like a cage made of guns. We had just appeared inside that cage. "How long before they notice us?" I asked. "They already have," Petra called from the weapons station. Her screens were flooding with data. "I am reading 40 active sensor locks. Make that 60, 70. Commander, every station in this sector is pinging us." I stood up. "My name is Idris Voss. I am a human being, and I am the captain of a ship called the Bone Furnace. 47 souls on board, not one of us a trained military officer, flying a vessel that every sensor in this sector was about to discover it could not identify. In about 90 seconds, the most powerful empire the galaxy has ever known was going to learn that everything it believed about my species was wrong." "Steady," I said. "Nobody touches a weapon until I say so. Sulo, hold our course toward the throne world. Reza, how is the reactor?" From the engineering bay 2 decks below, Reza Hadid's voice crackled through the intercom. "Running hot but stable. She will hold, Commander. Just do not ask me for miracles in the first 5 minutes." I almost smiled. Reza had been giving me miracles for 15 years. One more would not kill him. Probably. The truth about humanity and the Vorath Empire is simple, and it is ugly. 30 years ago, the Empire discovered that human beings were advancing technologically faster than any species in recorded galactic history. We had gone from crude chemical rockets to experimental hyperspace theory in less than 3 centuries. The Vorath took 9,000 years to achieve the same thing. The Dran took 12,000. The Kethis never got there at all without outside help. Humanity was doing something that terrified the established galactic order. We were learning too fast. When the Vorath realized what we were, they did not invite us into the galactic community. They did not offer trade agreements or cultural exchange. They passed something called the Containment Decree. Every human colony outside the Sol system was to be dismantled. Every human ship capable of interstellar travel was to be destroyed. Humanity was to be locked inside its home system and monitored until the Empire decided what to do with us. The official reason was that we were too primitive for galactic integration. The real reason was that we scared them so badly they could not sleep. I was 6 years old when Imperial soldiers came to Kalen's Reach, the colony where I was born. I remember the sky turning orange as their orbital bombardment began. I remember my mother carrying me through smoke and rubble toward a cargo shuttle that should not have been able to fly, its hull cracked, its engines coughing. I remember looking back through the shuttle's rear viewport as we lifted off, and seeing the colony below us turn into a sea of fire. I remember the faces of the people who did not make it to the shuttle. 312 people escaped that day, out of a population of 8,000. We fled into the deep fringe, the uncharted space beyond the Empire's borders, where the stars are thin and the void is cold, and nobody goes unless they have no other choice. For 30 years, we survived out there. We scavenged wreckage from dead ships and abandoned stations. We taught ourselves to read alien engineering schematics in languages we did not speak, translating by trial and error, burning through failed prototypes until something worked. We took apart Vorath shield generators, Kreth hull plating, Morith sensor arrays, and a dozen other technologies from species we had never met, and we figured out how they worked. Then we did something no species in the galaxy has ever done. We put them all together into something new. The Bone Furnace is not a warship. At least, it was not built as one. It started as a deep salvage hauler, a battered old frame designed to drag scrap metal through asteroid fields. Over 15 years, my crew and I rebuilt it from the keel out, using everything we had scavenged and everything we had learned. The hull is a patchwork of 11 different alien ship designs, fused into a single frame. The shields are a hybrid system that combines Vorath emitter technology with a human-designed frequency rotator that shifts harmonics faster than any targeting computer can track. The main weapon is a modified singularity lance, built from components we pulled out of a wrecked Vorath research station that had been abandoned after an experiment went wrong. The reactor core is a Vorath design they classified as unstable and too dangerous to operate. We use it anyway. We use it because we had no other option, and because humans have a relationship with the word impossible that other species do not seem to share. The result is a ship that does not match anything in any database anywhere in the galaxy. When Imperial scanners try to identify it, they get nothing. No match. No classification. No species of origin. Just a blank reading and a ship-sized object that should not exist, sitting in the most heavily defended zone in the known universe. "Commander," Petra said, "I have a hail coming in on the standard Imperial challenge frequency. Patrol fleet designation 974, 30 warships. Lead vessel identifies as the Dominance. The commanding officer is High Sentinel Draven. Put him through." The view screen shifted to show a Vorath face. The Vorath look like what you would get if you took a human, stretched them to 7 feet tall, gave them gray skin with a faint blue undertone, and replaced their eyes with something that looked like polished obsidian. Draven had the sharp, angular features of a high-born Vorath, and he wore the crimson shoulder plates of a senior military officer. His expression was one of annoyed superiority, the look of someone dealing with a minor inconvenience that should have been handled by a subordinate. "Unidentified vessel," Draven said. "You have entered restricted Imperial space without authorization. You will identify yourself and your species immediately, or you will be fired upon." I leaned forward in my chair. "High Sentinel Draven. My name is Commander Idris Voss. I am a human being. This is the independent vessel Bone Furnace, and we are passing through your space on our way to the throne world." The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. I counted. Then Draven laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, like a bark. "Human? That is your claim? Humans do not have vessels in Imperial space. Humans do not have vessels at all. Your species is confined to a single star system under the containment decree. I do not know what game you are playing, but I suggest you try a more convincing lie." "No game," I said. "No lie. Scan the ship again if you want. Check the biosignatures. There are 47 human beings on this vessel, and we are not stopping." Draven's amusement faded. He turned to someone off-screen and spoke in rapid Vorath. I caught fragments of the words even through the translation filter. The word for human, the word for impossible, the word for verification. Then he turned back to me, and his expression had changed. Not fear, not yet, but the first shadow of uncertainty cracking through his confidence. "Your biosignatures are confirmed as human," he said slowly, as if testing whether the words made sense coming out of his own mouth. "But this vessel, it does not match any known human technology. It does not match any known technology at all. That is because you destroyed all our known technology 30 years ago," I said. "We built new technology, better technology. You left us in the dark with nothing but your garbage, and we turned your garbage into something you cannot even identify. Impossible. Humans are a pre-expansion species. You do not have the capability to construct a vessel of this configuration. And yet here we are, High Sentinel, inside your sovereignty ring, in a ship your scanners cannot classify. Having a conversation you believe is impossible, so either your intelligence on humanity is wrong, or your scanners are lying to you. Which one would you prefer?" Draven stared at me. I watched the calculations running behind those black eyes. Pride fighting logic, doctrine fighting evidence. 9,000 years of Imperial superiority colliding with the reality of a human face on his view screen and a ship on his sensors that his computers could not explain. He wanted to dismiss me. Every fiber of his training told him that humans were primitives who could barely light a fire, but his instruments were telling him something different. And a Vorath officer, whatever else he might be, does not ignore his instruments. "You will hold position and prepare to be boarded," Draven said. "No." His jaw tightened. "That was not a request. And that was not a negotiation. We are passing through. You can escort us, or you can get out of the way. But we are not stopping. Not for you. Not for your fleet. Not for anyone." The channel cut to static. On the tactical display, 30 red triangles shifted formation. They were moving to intercept. "He is going for a standard interdiction pattern," Sulo said. "2 wings flanking, main body blocking our forward vector. Textbook formation." "Let them form up," I said. "Petra, power the forward array. Do not charge weapons. Just let them see the energy spike on their sensors." Petra's hands moved across her console. Deep in the belly of the bone furnace, the Singularity Lance's capacitor banks began to hum. The sound traveled through the hull like a heartbeat. It was not a threatening gesture exactly. It was more like cracking your knuckles before a fight. A reminder that you have fists, and you know how to use them. On the tactical display, the 30 warships completed their formation. A wall of guns between us and the throne world. Draven's voice returned on the channel, and the politeness was gone entirely. "Unidentified vessel, this is your final warning. You will cut engines and submit to boarding, or we will open fire." I looked at my crew. Petra met my eyes and gave me a small nod, her hand resting on the weapons console with the calm readiness of someone who had rehearsed this moment in her mind 1,000 times. Sulo's hands were steady on the navigation controls. "From engineering," Reza's voice came through. "One more time. Shields are up and cycling. She is ready, Commander." "Hold steady," I told them all. "We do not fire first, but we do not flinch either." The lead Vorath destroyer, the Dominance, fired. Not a full attack, a warning salvo. 3 plasma bolts designed to cross our bow and force us to change course. Except they did not cross our bow. Whether by miscalculation or intention, they hit us dead center. The bridge shuddered. The lights flickered once. The impact readings scrolled across Petra's screen. She read them aloud, in a voice that carried a two-hedge of pure disbelief. "Hull integrity at 99.7%. Shield degradation negligible. Commander, that was a direct hit from a Vorath destroyer-class plasma battery, and we barely felt it." Silence on the bridge. Silence on the Imperial channel. I imagined Draven staring at his own damage assessment, trying to reconcile what his weapons had done with what our ship had just shrugged off. A destroyer-class plasma battery was designed to punch through military-grade shielding. It had bounced off our hull like a stone skipping off a lake. His voice came back on the channel, and the arrogance was gone. What replaced it was something I had never heard from a Vorath before. Genuine confusion bordering on alarm. "What is that ship?" I did not answer. I let the question hang in the void between us. I let it do its work, because that question was about to spread through the Imperial chain of command, like fire through dry grass, and by the time it reached the throne world, the answer would terrify every official, every admiral, and every politician who heard it. "Sulo," I said quietly, "maintain course. Take us deeper." The bone furnace pushed forward into the heart of the Empire, and behind us, 30 Vorath warships sat frozen in space, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Draven did not let us go quietly. I knew he would not. Whatever confusion he felt, he was still a high sentinel of the Vorath Imperial Navy, and he had given an order that had been refused by a species his empire considered barely sentient. In his world, that could not stand. His pride would not allow it. His training would not permit it. "All batteries, full barrage," he commanded, and his entire fleet responded. 30 warships opened fire at the same time. The void between us and them turned into a solid wall of plasma, kinetic rounds, and directed energy beams. Our tactical display went white with incoming fire markers. So many individual projectile tracks that the computer stopped trying to plot them individually and just painted the entire forward arc red. The bridge vibrated so hard my teeth rattled, and the hum of the shields rose to a high-pitched whine that set my nerves on edge. "Shields holding," Petra reported, her voice tight but steady. "Hybrid rotation is compensating across all frequencies. They are throwing everything in the standard Vorath energy bands. and we are cycling through all of them faster than their weapons can adjust. That was the trick. The advantage nobody in the galaxy knew we had. Vorath weapons operated in predictable energy frequency ranges. Their own shields were tuned to deflect those exact ranges, which meant their weapons and defenses were locked in a known spectrum. Every Vorath weapon and every Vorath shield spoke the same language. Our shield system, designed by human engineers who had learned Vorath technology from the outside in, who had taken it apart and put it back together with fresh eyes and no assumptions, did not stay in one frequency. It rotated, constantly, unpredictably. Every time a Vorath weapon locked onto our shield frequency and fired, the frequency had already changed by the time the shot arrived. They were shooting at where our shields had been, not where they were. The barrage lasted 90 seconds. 90 seconds of every weapon 30 warships could bring to bear, concentrated on a single target. It was enough firepower to crack a small moon, enough to reduce a planet's surface to glass, enough to destroy anything the galaxy had ever produced. When it stopped, the bone furnace was still there, scorched in places where the hull plating had absorbed extreme heat, glowing faintly along the starboard side where the energy absorption had been heaviest, but intact, functional, moving forward as if nothing had happened. Petra looked at her readouts and let out a long, slow breath. They gave us everything they had. And now they know it was not enough, I said. Petra, target the fleet's central command relay, the station sitting in the middle of their formation. One shot. Singularity lance at 40% power. 40%? Commander. That relay is a hardened military installation, with its own shield grid. I know what it is, and I want it gone, not the ships around it. One clean shot. Show them what we can do without showing them everything. Petra locked the target. The Singularity lance charged, and I felt the vibration through the soles of my boots as the capacitors reached firing threshold. On the view screen, I could see the relay station, a rotating octagonal structure bristling with communication arrays, sensor dishes, and defensive turrets. It was the nerve center of the patrol fleet, the hub through which all 30 ships coordinated their actions, shared targeting data, and received orders. Firing. The lance discharged. It did not look like a conventional weapon blast. There was no beam of light, no streak of plasma, no visible projectile. The air in front of our ship seemed to fold inward, like space itself was being pinched, and a ripple of distorted vacuum traveled across the void at a speed that was difficult for the eye to track. When it reached the relay station, the station did not explode. It did not shatter or break apart. It compressed. It folded inward on itself, collapsing into a point so impossibly small it seemed to simply vanish from existence. One moment it was there, an installation the size of a city block. The next it was not. Just empty space and a faint shimmer of displaced energy. The energy signature of the shot registered on every sensor in the sector. It did not match any known weapon type in any galactic database. Draven's fleet broke formation instantly. Not a retreat, not a tactical withdrawal, a panicked scatter. Ships that had been holding precise geometric positions moments ago were now veering away from each other at maximum thrust, their captains overriding fleet commands and acting on pure survival instinct. I did not blame them. They had just watched a single shot from an unidentified vessel do something to a hardened military installation that their own weapons could not do with sustained bombardment. Something their science said should not be possible. Imperial communication channels are going wild, Sulo said, monitoring the intercepts with wide eyes. Lower ranks are reporting contact with an unknown vessel of human origin that withstood full fleet bombardment and destroyed a relay station with a single discharge. Mid-level command is refusing to believe the reports. A sector commander just called it a sensor malfunction and demanded recalibration of the entire patrol fleet's instruments. It will not be a sensor malfunction for long, I said. Not when the visual recordings start circulating. Not when every officer in that fleet files an identical report. I was right. Over the next 20 minutes, as we continued on our course deeper into Imperial space, I watched the intercepted communications climb the chain of command. It was like watching a fire catch and spread. First the patrol officers, confused and alarmed. Then the sector commanders, dismissive and irritated. Then the regional admirals, suddenly very quiet, each level expressing more disbelief than the last, then falling silent, as the sensor data became impossible to explain away. Until the message reached the highest military authority in the Empire, the Imperial War Council on the throne world itself. The War Council had not convened an emergency session in 400 years, not since the Drying Confederacy made its last stand. They convened one now. "How are we doing, Reza?" I called down to engineering. "Reactor is running at 112%, which I would like to point out, is already past the manufacturer's recommended maximum, assuming the manufacturer had not abandoned this reactor design because they considered it suicidal. The Kreth hull plating took the brunt of that barrage and dissipated heat beautifully, but 3 of the secondary coolant loops are showing stress fractures. I can patch them, but I need an hour. You have 30 minutes. Then I need 30 minutes and a lot of profanity." I walked the length of the bridge and looked at the people around me. My crew, 47 souls aboard a ship that had no right to exist, heading toward a world that had tried to erase us from history. None of them were soldiers. Not one had attended a military academy or served in any navy. Petra Morrow had been a mining explosives technician on Kalen's Reach before the Empire burned her home when she was 9 years old. She had lost both parents in the bombardment. She had learned weapons systems from salvaged manuals written in 3 different alien languages, teaching herself through trial and error over years of patient, furious determination, until she could outshoot trained military officers in simulations we built from captured Vorath training software. Sulo Achebe had been born in the Fringe, in a pressurized habitat carved into an asteroid. He had never seen Earth, never set foot on a planet with a real sky and open air. He had learned navigation by plotting courses through debris fields, where a single miscalculation of half a degree meant slamming into a tumbling chunk of rock at 1,000 meters per second. Reza Hadid had been an apprentice mechanic at 14, learning his trade by keeping the failing systems of our refugee fleet alive with salvaged parts and improvised solutions. He had kept the Bone Furnace's impossible reactor running for 15 years through a combination of genius, stubbornness, and what I suspected was a deep personal grudge against the laws of thermodynamics. These people had built this ship with their bare hands. They had welded hull plates in zero gravity, tethered to the frame by cables, while the cold of deep space tried to freeze them solid. They had spliced alien power conduits by candlelight when the generators failed. Working with blueprints, they had translated themselves from dead languages. They had tested weapon systems that they knew might detonate in their faces because there was no simulation, no safety net, no other way to know if they worked, except to pull the trigger and hope. Every bolt, every wire, every impossible system on this vessel existed because a human being had refused to accept that it could not be done. And now they were flying their creation into the heart of the Empire that had tried to destroy them. "Commander," Sulo said, breaking my thoughts with a tone that made my spine straighten. "Long-range sensors are picking up a large formation ahead, 120 warships in a standard Vorath assault configuration. Lead vessel is broadcasting on a flag rank frequency. They are not moving to intercept. They are already in position. They were waiting for us." The main display updated. Where Draven's patrol fleet had been a cluster of 30 red triangles, this was a wall of them. 120 warships arranged in precise rows and columns. Their formation a classic Vorath siege pattern I recognized from the captured tactical archives we had studied for years. At its center sat a single massive signature, 3 times the size of any other ship in the formation. A Vorath command dreadnought. "Identification on the lead vessel?" I asked. "Broadcasting as the Iron Purpose, flag vessel of the 9th Vanguard Battle Group, under the command of Fleet Marshal Osenkar." The name hit me like cold water. Every human who had studied the Empire's military history knew that name. Osenkar was the officer who had crushed the Kethis rebellion. He had cornered the Kethis fleet in their home system and systematically destroyed every ship, every station, every orbital platform, until the Kethis had nothing left but their planet and their grief. He did not negotiate. He did not bluff. He arrived, he calculated, and he destroyed. He was the Empire's executioner. "No hail from them?" I asked. "Nothing. They are forming up in a siege sphere, standard Vorath doctrine for trapping and eliminating a high-value target." "He thinks we are a high-value target." Petra said with a grim, tight smile. He got Draven's combat data. He knows what we did to that relay station. He knows our shields held against a full fleet barrage. He is not playing games. The siege sphere was closing. 120 warships forming a contracting shell around us. Each ship covering the gaps left by its neighbors, creating a three-dimensional killing box with no exit vector. Every angle covered, every escape route blocked. It was the formation that had ended the Kethis Rebellion, the formation that had shattered the Drine Confederacy. No ship had ever broken out of a Vorath siege sphere. It was considered the most perfect tactical construct in galactic military history. "He is hailing us now," Sulo said. Ossinkar appeared on the view screen. He looked nothing like Draven. Where the High Sentinel had been sharp-featured and visibly arrogant, Ossinkar was broad, heavy, and completely still. His face had the weathered, hollowed look of someone who had spent decades watching civilizations end. His black Vorath eyes held no contempt, no anger, no emotion at all. He did not introduce himself. He did not ask questions. He did not waste a single word. He said one word: surrender. I studied his face for a long moment. Behind those flat black eyes, I could see something that Draven had completely lacked: respect. Ossinkar was not dismissing us. He was not treating this as a joke or a misunderstanding. He was treating us as a genuine threat that needed to be eliminated with overwhelming force. He had brought 120 warships against one vessel because he had seen the data, and he understood what it meant. Which meant he would fight like someone who takes his enemy seriously. That made him far more dangerous than Draven had ever been. "Fleet Marshal," I said. "I decline." Ossinkar did not react. His expression did not change by a single degree. "Then you will be destroyed." "Maybe, but not the way you think." I cut the channel and opened the ship-wide intercom. "All hands, stand by for fracture run. I say again, fracture run. All stations confirm ready." There was no panic, no hesitation, no questions. Every crew member moved to their assigned position with the calm, practiced focus of people who had trained for this exact scenario 1,000 times in the deep fringe. Petra's fingers danced across the weapons console, activating targeting sequences she had pre-programmed months ago. Sulo pulled up the jump calculations he had been refining and testing obsessively for the past year. In engineering, Reza began feeding the reactor the precise power sequence the maneuver required. The bone furnace had one advantage that no other ship in the galaxy possessed, an advantage that came from the unique hybrid nature of our hyperdrive. Our jump system, cobbled together from 6 different alien hyperspace technologies, could do something that conventional physics said should have been physically impossible. It could execute micro-jumps, not the long-range hyperspace transits that every species used for interstellar travel, but tiny, precise hops through folded space, each one lasting less than 2 seconds, and covering distances measured in hundreds of meters rather than light years. We had tested the system in the deep fringe, jumping between asteroid fragments at ranges so close that a miscalculation of half a second would have put us inside solid rock. It was dangerous. It was unstable. It pushed our reactor to its limits. And it was about to turn Ossinkar's perfect siege sphere into a cage full of confusion. "Fracture run in 5 seconds, Sulo announced, his voice as calm as if he were reading a weather report. 4, 3, 2, 1. Jumping. The universe blinked. We were inside the siege sphere at bearing 005, behind a Vorath cruiser that had been facing outward. Before its crew could even register our presence, the Singularity Lance fired. The cruiser lost its entire engine section, the rear third of the ship folding in on itself and vanishing. The universe blinked again. Bearing 180, the opposite side of the formation. We emerged facing a pair of destroyers that were still turning to find us at our last position. The Lance fired. One destroyer's weapons array crumpled like paper. Again, bearing 090, a frigate that never saw us coming was split down its center line, the two halves drifting apart in the eerie silence of vacuum. Again, bearing 270, another disabled engine, another warship going dark. Again. 6 micro-jumps in 11 seconds. Each one placed us inside the siege sphere at a completely different angle. Each one lasted just long enough for Petra to acquire a target and fire a single precision shot before space folded again and we vanished. The Vorath ships could not track us. Their targeting systems needed at least 3 seconds to acquire a lock, and we were never in one place for more than 2. By the time their computers registered our position, we were already gone, reappearing somewhere else in the formation and firing again. They were fighting a ghost. When we emerged from the far side of the siege sphere, the bone furnace was trailing plasma from a dozen hull scrapes where we had passed dangerously close to enemy vessels during transit. The outer hull was glowing white-hot from the accumulated thermal stress of 6 rapid jumps. Warning indicators covered every console on the bridge, and my ears were ringing from the repeated sonic shocks of jump transitions. But behind us, the siege sphere was broken. 6 ships disabled, 3 more heavily damaged and drifting. 1 dreadnought split in half, its atmosphere venting in great white plumes that caught the starlight and turned them into ghostly ribbons. The precise geometric formation that had never been defeated in the entire history of the Vorath Empire was now a scattered mess of confused, panicking vessels trying to re-establish formation integrity, while their targeting systems screamed contradictory data. "Ossinkar is ordering pursuit," Sulo reported. "But we are already accelerating past their intercept threshold. They cannot catch us at current velocity." I let myself breathe. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the sheer physical strain of 6 micro-jumps in 11 seconds. Every jump felt like being turned inside out, disassembled at the atomic level, and hastily reassembled. My crew had just endured 6 of them in rapid succession while maintaining combat operations at peak performance. "Status report," I said. "Hull integrity at 89%, Petra said. "Minor breaches on decks 2 and 6, already self-sealing, no casualties, weapons systems nominal. Lance charge at 73% and climbing. Reactor is at 128% and still climbing," Reza added from below, and I could hear the strain in his voice. "The micro-jump sequence stressed the containment field badly. I am reinforcing it now, but Commander, I need to be direct with you. We cannot do that again. Not at that frequency. The reactor was never meant to cycle that fast, and 2 of the phase alignment coils are showing micro-fractures. 1 more fracture run at that speed and we risk a containment breach." "Understood," I said. "Good work, all of you. That was perfect." On the communications intercept, the aftermath of the fracture run was spreading through Imperial channels like a shockwave of its own. Ossinkar's fleet was reporting what had happened, in clipped, professional tones. But underneath the military discipline, the shock was unmistakable. Officers who had served for decades were struggling to describe what they had witnessed. No ship had ever broken a Vorath siege sphere. No ship had ever demonstrated the capability to micro-jump within a tactical formation. The maneuver itself violated fundamental assumptions about hyperspace mechanics that the Vorath had held as scientific law for thousands of years. The tactical implications alone were enough to rewrite every combat doctrine the Empire had developed in 9,000 years of warfare. But it was not the military implications that were causing the real panic. It was the origin of the ship. Because Draven's initial identification had been confirmed by Ossinkar's own sensor teams, cross-referenced and verified multiple times. The biosignatures aboard the bone furnace were human, all 47 of them. The ship's construction, while incorporating technology from nearly a dozen alien species, showed clear signatures of human engineering methodology in its integration patterns. The impossible vessel that had just humiliated 2 Imperial fleets in succession was built by a species that was supposed to be locked in a single star system, too primitive to pose any threat to anyone. I monitored the intercepted feeds from the Imperial capital as we continued toward the throne world. The Emperor, Vorath Sovereign Caliph the Undying, had been presented with the combined combat data from both engagements. The Imperial court was in chaos. Military advisors were shouting at each other in the formal chambers, something that had not happened in living memory. Diplomatic staff were scrambling to assess the political implications. Intelligence officers were being summoned and interrogated about how their surveillance of humanity had failed so completely. Some insisted it was a deception, a rival empire using a disguised ship with faked human biosignatures to test the empire's defenses. Others argued that the technical data was impossible to fabricate, that no known species could produce the energy signatures the bone furnace had displayed. The containment decree had been built on the assumption that humanity would remain technologically primitive for centuries, developing at the slow, predictable pace that every other species in galactic history had followed. The idea that humans had built something like the bone furnace, alone, in exile, from salvaged wreckage, with no industrial base and no support, was shattering a fundamental belief that the Empire had held for 30 years. The phrase I kept hearing on the intercepted channels, repeated by officers and officials and analysts and scientists and politicians, spoken in tones ranging from disbelief to whispered fear, was always the same. That cannot be a human warship. But it was, and they were running out of ways to pretend it was not. I left the bridge and walked through the corridors of my ship. I needed to move, needed to feel the deck under my feet, and the hum of the reactor through the walls. The bone furnace was not a pretty vessel. The corridors were uneven, the walls a patchwork of different metals and alloys welded together with more determination than elegance. You could see where Kreth hull plating met Vorath structural beams, the join lines rough and hand-finished. In some sections, the walls still bore the faded markings of whatever alien vessel the material had originally come from, ghost letters in languages I could read but not speak. We had not built a showpiece. We had built a machine that worked. I stopped at the reactor bay and watched Reza work through the observation window. He was elbow-deep in a coolant assembly, his hands moving with the precise confidence of someone who had done this exact repair 100 times in conditions that would make a certified engineer faint. His crew of 5 engineers worked around him in the tight, hot space, passing tools and components in a choreography so practiced it looked like a dance. "How is she really holding?" I asked through the intercom. Reza did not look up from his work. "She is angry, but she will hold. I need to replace 2 of the secondary coolant injectors before the next engagement. The micro-jumps cracked the thermal casings. Can you do it while we are in transit?" "I am doing it now." He paused, his hands still for a moment, then looked up at me through the window. His face was streaked with coolant fluid and engine grease, and his eyes were red from exhaustion and heat exposure. "Commander, what you did back there, the fracture run. I have read every military engagement record we have salvaged from every species in this part of the galaxy. No one has ever done anything like that. We built a ship that can do things nobody thought possible. We might as well use it for something that matters." Reza smiled, a thin, tired expression that did not quite hide the pride underneath. "When I was a boy, before the Empire came, my father was a reactor technician on Kalen's Reach. He used to tell me that humans do not accept the word impossible. We just treat it as a design challenge that nobody has solved yet." I put my hand against the observation window. "Your father was right. Get those injectors replaced, Reza. We are not done yet. Not even close." There was something I had not told my crew. Not all of it. They knew we were carrying a message. They knew we had evidence of the Empire's crimes against humanity. But they did not know everything about why the Empire had really come to Kalen's Reach 30 years ago. They did not know what was truly hidden in our data core, and they did not know what the Empire had been trying to bury. 30 years ago, when the first human colonists settled Kalen's Reach, they discovered something in the planet's deep crust during a routine geological survey. An artifact, not human, not Vorath, not from any species currently alive in the galaxy. It was old, unimaginably old. The initial analysis suggested it predated the Vorath Empire by millions of years, perhaps tens of millions. It was a precursor relic, a fragment of technology left behind by whoever had inhabited the galaxy before any current species evolved, before any civilization currently recorded in galactic history had even begun. The colony's scientists had barely begun studying the artifact when the Vorath arrived. Not as diplomats, not as curious fellow explorers. They came with warships and ground troops and orbital bombardment platforms. They came because their own deep space surveys had detected the artifact's unique energy signature, and they knew exactly what it was. The Vorath had encountered precursor technology before. Fragments of it were scattered across the galaxy from an era so distant it predated their own recorded history by an order of magnitude. Every fragment they had found contained knowledge and capabilities that exceeded anything the modern galaxy could produce. The precursors had understood physics at a level that made current galactic science look like children drawing pictures in the dirt. The Empire did not destroy Kalen's reach because humans were advancing too fast. That was the cover story. They destroyed it because humans had found something first, something the Empire wanted desperately and could not allow anyone else to possess. And the containment decree was not about keeping humanity primitive. It was about making sure no one in the galaxy ever discovered that the Empire had committed an act of war against a developing species to steal a precursor artifact, then lied about it for 30 years. Hidden in the bone furnace's data core was every piece of evidence I had spent 20 years collecting. Vorath military communications from the day of the attack, recovered from the wreckage of destroyed warships we had salvaged in the fringe. Internal Imperial memos discussing the artifact's seizure, leaked by Vorath officers whose consciences would not let them stay silent. Scientific reports on the artifact's properties that had been classified at the highest level. Transfer records showing the artifact being moved to a secret research facility on the throne world. Testimony from Vorath soldiers who had participated in the destruction of the colony and later defected because they could not live with what they had done. It was enough to prove everything, every lie, every covered-up atrocity, and I had already sent it all. 6 hours before we jumped into the sovereignty ring, I had transmitted the entire data package on every independent species communication network I could reach. The Drin remnant networks, the Kethis survivor channels, the Galactic Neutral Assembly's public archive, dozens of independent relay stations operated by species who had no love for the Vorath Empire and no reason to suppress the truth. The data was out there now, spreading across the galaxy at the speed of light, being downloaded, copied, analyzed, and discussed by millions of beings who had lived under the Empire's shadow and always suspected that the shadow hid something rotten. The bone furnace was not the weapon. It never had been. The truth was the weapon. We were just the delivery system, the burning arrow shot across the sky to make sure everyone looked up. I returned to the bridge and pulled up the navigational chart. The throne world was one final jump away. Behind us, Osenkar's damaged fleet was regrouping, but showed no signs of pursuit. They had learned their lesson. Ahead of us, though, the Empire was marshalling its true strength. "Commander," Petra said, her voice carrying a weight that made me turn immediately. "You need to see this." The tactical display updated, and my stomach dropped through the deck. 300 warships, not patrol vessels, not a standard battle group. The Crimson Veil Armada, the most powerful military force the Vorath Empire had ever assembled. Dreadnoughts, battle cruisers, heavy destroyers, carrier platforms, and at its center, a ship so massive it dwarfed everything around it like a mountain surrounded by foothills. The Throne of Kaleth, the Emperor's personal flagship, a vessel 4 kilometers long, carrying enough firepower to sterilize a planet. This was the force that had ended the Kethis Rebellion, the force that had broken the Drime Confederacy. It had not been deployed at full strength in over 2 centuries because nothing in the galaxy had warranted it. The fact that it was here, fully assembled and positioned directly in our path, told me everything I needed to know about how seriously the Empire was taking this. We were not just a military problem anymore, we were an existential crisis. "The Emperor is aboard the flagship," Sulo said quietly, Sovereign Kaleth himself. I looked at the display. 300 warships against 1 ship and 47 people. The numbers were beyond absurd. They were laughable. Any rational analysis would conclude that we were already dead. But we had not come this far to be rational. We had come this far to be human. I dropped us out of hyperspace within visual range of the Crimson Veil Armada, and the view screen filled with death. 300 warships arranged in the Imperial Crown Formation, a vast, layered hemisphere of firepower, with the throne of Kaleth at its apex like a dark god sitting on a throne of smaller gods. It was the most devastating battle array in galactic history, and it was beautiful in the way that a predator is beautiful, all purpose and power, and lethal intent. "Open a channel," I said, "not to the fleet commander, not to the admirals. Sovereign frequency, the Emperor's personal communication band." Sulo looked at me with eyes that went wide. "Commander, the sovereign frequency has never been used by a non-Vorath. In 9,000 years of Empire, it has never happened. It is a capital offense to even attempt access." Sulo, we are already committing about 100 capital offenses by existing. One more will not tip the scales. Open the channel. He opened it, and across the Crimson Veil Armada, on every ship, on every bridge, in every officer's quarters, and every crew berth, a human voice spoke on the frequency, reserved exclusively for the Vorath Emperor. Sovereign Caliph, I said. My name is Commander Idris Voss. I am a human being. I was born on Kalin's Reach, the colony your empire destroyed 30 years ago. I was 6 years old when your soldiers burned my home and killed 8,000 people, including my mother. I am here to tell you that the galaxy now knows what you did and why you did it. They know about the containment decree. They know about the precursor artifact your forces seized from our colony. They know that you destroyed an entire settlement and locked an entire species in a cage to cover up an act of theft and murder. 6 hours ago, I transmitted the full evidentiary record to every independent communication network outside Imperial control. It is already being distributed, analyzed, and broadcast across the galaxy by species and organizations you cannot silence. You can destroy my ship, you can kill every one of us, but the galaxy already has the truth. And they are going to ask why you were so afraid of 47 humans in a ship made of scrap that you sent 300 warships to stop us. I released the transmission key and let the silence fill the bridge. My crew was staring at me. Petra had her hand over her mouth, her eyes bright. Sulo's fingers were frozen over the navigation console. From engineering, Reza's voice came through the intercom, very quiet. Commander, did you just broadcast on the sovereign frequency? To the Emperor? Personally? I did. And the evidence? You already sent it? Before we even jumped? 6 hours ago. Silence. Then Reza laughed. It was a real laugh, full and deep and genuine, the kind of laugh that comes from a place beyond fear, from a place where the worst has already been accepted, and what remains is just the pure, clean joy of defiance. You magnificent, beautiful fool. The response from the Armada came 30 seconds later, not from an admiral, not from a fleet commander, from the Emperor himself. Calith's voice was unlike any Vorath I had ever heard. It was old, not just old in years, but old in a way that suggested something fundamental about the nature of power held too long, wielded too absolutely. It was cold, controlled, and beneath the control, burning with a fury that was almost elemental. You have made a grave error, human. I have made a choice, Sovereign. There is a difference. You believe your evidence will change anything. The Vorath Empire has ruled this galaxy for 9,000 years. We have outlasted species, civilizations, and ideas that were ancient before your kind learned to walk upright. Your data, your accusations, your pathetic little ship made of stolen scraps, they are nothing. They will be forgotten before the next cycle turns. Maybe, I said, but right now, every vassal state in your empire is watching this conversation. Every subject species is hearing a human challenge the sovereign on his own private channel, and they are all wondering the same thing. If 47 refugees in a junkyard ship can do this, what happens when the rest of humanity wakes up? The channel cut. On the tactical display, every weapon on every ship in the Crimson Veil Armada began charging simultaneously. 300 warships powering up every gun they had, all pointed at us. All hands, I said. Battle stations, this is it. The Armada opened fire. There was no warning salvo, no measured response, no attempt at communication. 300 warships unleashed everything they had in a single, overwhelming barrage that turned the space around us into a continuous wall of destruction. The void lit up so brightly that the view screen's filters engaged to prevent the glare from blinding us. I had studied Vorath fleet tactics for 2 decades. I had memorized every formation, every doctrine, every standard operating procedure, from thousands of recovered engagement records. And I knew one thing about the Imperial Crown formation, that its designers had never considered a weakness, because no enemy had ever survived long enough to exploit it. The formation was dense. Ships were positioned close together to maximize overlapping fields of fire, creating an interlocking web of destruction that could annihilate anything caught in its center. In theory, this was invincible. In practice, it meant that if a small, fast, agile ship could get inside the formation, the surrounding vessels could not use their heavy weapons without risking devastating hits on their own ships. Sulo, take us in. Full speed. Straight into the formation. Thread us between the capital ships. Between them? Commander, the gaps are less than 200 meters in some places. We are 300 meters wide. Then fly at an angle. I trust you, Sulo. Get us inside. Sulo's jaw set, and the bone furnace dove into the teeth of the armada. The next several minutes were the most intense of my life. Sulo flew with a precision that bordered on inhuman, threading our ship through spaces between dreadnoughts that would have made a shuttle pilot break out in a cold sweat. He rolled us 90 degrees to slip through a gap between two battlecruisers, righted us in time to dodge a carrier platform's extended flight deck, then dove under a heavy destroyer's keel with less than 40 meters of clearance. At these ranges, the Vorath could not use their main batteries without hitting their own ships. They switched to close-range point defense systems, smaller weapons designed for intercepting missiles and strafing fighters, not engaging a vessel of our size. The shots stung, chipping away at our shields and scoring the hull with shallow burns, but they could not deliver the killing blow they needed. We, on the other hand, could fire at will. At these distances, even a blind man could not miss. Petra, engines only, I ordered. Disable. Do not destroy. I want them crippled, not dead. We are not here to massacre anyone. Petra worked the weapons console with cold, mechanical precision, placing singularity lance shots at minimum power into engine sections, weapons arrays, and shield generators. Each shot was surgical, calculated to the millimeter. Each shot took a warship out of the fight without killing its crew. I did not want a massacre. I did not want revenge. I wanted a message that could not be ignored. But 300 ships is still 300 ships, and even with Sulo's impossible flying, we could not dodge everything forever. The first real hit came from a destroyer that managed to get a clean firing angle as we passed beneath its keel. A full-power plasma battery strike caught our port quarter, where the shield rotation had left a momentary gap. The beam punched through and hit bare hull. Deck 4 breached. Atmosphere screamed out through the gap before the emergency bulkhead slammed shut. The impact threw me sideways out of my chair, and I hit the deck hard enough to see white stars burst across my vision. "Breach on Deck 4, Petra shouted over the alarms. "Breach on Deck 7. We are losing atmosphere in 2 sections. Casualties?" Her voice changed. "Just slightly. Just enough." 2 confirmed. Tara Osei and Dominic Hale. They were in the port maintenance corridor when the hull gave way. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Just one. Tara had been our communications specialist, the woman who had cracked the Vorath military encryption protocols that let us intercept Imperial channels. Without her work, we would have been flying blind. Dominic had been a hull welder, one of the original refugees from Kalen's Reach, one of the people who had literally built the ship we were flying with his own hands. He had welded the very plate that had just failed to protect him. They were gone, and I felt their loss like a wound in my chest that would never fully close. "Keep moving," I said, pulling myself back into the chair. "Their sacrifice means nothing if we stop now." The battle continued. More hits, more damage. The bone furnace was absorbing punishment that would have destroyed any conventional vessel 10 times over, but she held. She held because every system on the ship had been built with desperate redundancy by engineers, who expected everything to fail eventually and planned for it. When the primary shield emitters went down, secondary systems activated. When those degraded manual overrides kicked in, when the main power conduits were severed, backup lines rerouted automatically through pathways Reza had installed for exactly this scenario. In engineering, Reza was fighting his own desperate battle. The reactor was screaming, pushed far beyond any safe operational limit. Systems that were never designed to work together were failing in cascading sequences, each failure triggering 2 more. Reza was patching them in real time, rerouting power with one hand while bypassing damaged components with the other, holding the whole impossible machine together through sheer force of will and a vocabulary of profanity that spanned 3 languages. "Commander," Reza's voice came over the intercom, strained but steady. "I need to do something we have never tried. something that might save us or destroy us. Tell me. The precursor components. The fragments we built into the ship's frame when we found them floating in the wreckage at Kalen's Drift. We integrated them into the reactor's containment structure because they seemed to strengthen whatever material they were bonded to, but we never fully activated them because we did not understand what they would do. Right now, they are integrated into the reactor's containment system, and I believe I can channel the reactor's full output through them. If it works, it will boost our energy output beyond anything we have ever achieved. If it does not work, the reactor breaches and we are dust. You believe it will work, you do not know. Commander, I know that if I do not try something, the reactor fails in 12 minutes, and this fight is over regardless. The precursor components are our only option. I thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. 12 minutes to reactor failure, 300 warships around us, nowhere to run. Do it. Reza rerouted the reactor's output through the precursor components, fragments of technology millions of years old that we had found drifting in the debris field near our destroyed colony, and incorporated into the ship's frame without ever truly understanding their purpose. The moment the reactor's energy flowed through them, something changed. I felt it in my bones before I saw it on any display. A vibration, deep and resonant and ancient, that had nothing to do with the engines or the weapons or any system we had built. It was as if the ship itself had woken up. The lights on the bridge shifted, taking on a faint blue luminescence that was not coming from any of our light fixtures. On the weapons console, Petra's displays recalibrated wildly as the ship's energy output doubled, then tripled, then climbed past anything our instruments were designed to measure. "What is happening?" Petra whispered. "I do not know," I admitted, "but whatever it is, use it, now." She fired the Singularity Lance. At full power through our normal systems, the lance was already the most devastating weapon we possessed. Channeled through precursor-enhanced systems, it became something else entirely. The beam that erupted from the bone furnace's forward array did not just disable the target cruiser. It cut through the vessel's hull from bow to stern as if the ship were made of wet paper, passed completely through it, and continued into the heavy destroyer behind it. 2 warships, both disabled by a single shot, that did not even slow down as it passed through the first target. The Armada's formation did not just break, it collapsed. Ships that had been holding position with military discipline broke ranks and scattered, their captains overriding fleet commands in their desperate urgency to get away from whatever the bone furnace had become. This was no longer a battle they could win with numbers. This was no longer a battle they understood. My original broadcast was working. The sensor feeds from this engagement were being relayed in real time across every independent network I had contacted before the jump. Across the galaxy, species that had lived under Vorath domination for millennia were watching the fight unfold. The Drain remnants, whose fleet had been destroyed by this very armada generations ago. The Kethis survivors, who had been crushed and scattered and forgotten. Dozens of conquered and subjugated peoples who had been told for their entire existence that the Vorath Empire was invincible. They were watching 47 humans in a ship built from garbage fight the full military might of the Empire, and the Empire was losing. The political consequences struck like lightning. The Dren remnant, a scattered people who had not spoken with a unified voice in decades, transmitted a declaration of independence on open channels. The Kethis survivors did the same. Within hours, 17 vassal states went silent on Imperial command frequencies, their governors refusing to answer the Throne World's communications. Tribute shipments halted mid-transit. Military units in the outer provinces stopped responding to orders and declared neutrality. The Empire was fracturing in real time, not because it had been defeated militarily, but because the myth of its invincibility had been shattered, and without that myth, there was nothing holding the conquered peoples in line. On the bridge of the throne of Calith, Sovereign Calith watched his empire begin to unravel, and he made a decision that revealed the true depth of his desperation and the true nature of his fear. "Commander," Sulo said, his voice suddenly razor-sharp. "Energy buildup on the flagship. Massive, unprecedented energy buildup. I have never seen readings like this. Nothing in our databases matches this signature. I looked at the display. The throne of Calith was channeling power to a weapons system I recognized from the deepest, most classified archives we had recovered over years of salvage operations. It was called the Void Hammer. It was a weapon so powerful that the Empire's own laws prohibited its deployment. It was designed to crack planets open. Using it here, in the heart of Imperial space, surrounded by the Empire's own fleet and orbital infrastructure, was an act of absolute insanity. The collateral damage alone would be catastrophic. But Calith was beyond rational calculation. The existence of the bone furnace, the irrefutable proof that humans had built something superior from the Empire's own discarded technology, was not merely a military threat. It was an existential one. It struck at the very foundation on which the Empire was built. The deep, unquestioned belief that the Vorath were supreme, that they were chosen, that no lesser species could ever truly challenge them. If that belief died, the Empire died with it. And Calith would rather destroy everything than let that happen. If that weapon fires at full power, we are gone, Petra said, her voice flat and matter-of-fact. Our shields, even enhanced by the precursor components, cannot withstand a planet-killer discharge at this range. Nothing can. I stared at the flagship on the display. The Void Hammer's energy signature was climbing steadily, a graph on Sulo's screen rising like a fever chart toward a peak that would erase us from existence. We had seconds, maybe 45 of them. Not enough time to run, not enough time to jump, not enough time to do anything except one insane, desperate, absolutely human thing. Sulo, plot a collision course, not with the flagship itself, with the Void Hammer assembly on its ventral hull. Take us straight into the barrel of the weapon. The bridge went completely silent. The alarms were still blaring. The hull was still groaning under damage. The tactical display was still filled with hostile contacts. But for one moment, every sound seemed to fade as every member of my crew turned to look at me. "Commander," Sulo said carefully, "if we fly into the Void Hammer during its firing sequence, we will be heading directly into the most powerful energy discharge in the galaxy at the exact moment it fires." "I know. That is insane." "Sulo, course, now." He set the course. His hands did not shake. I opened the ship-wide channel one final time. "All hands, this is the commander. We are making a final run at the Imperial flagship. I will not insult any of you by pretending this is anything other than what it is. This is the most dangerous thing we have ever done. But we did not build this ship to be safe. We did not fly into the Empire's heart to survive. We came here to be seen, and we have been seen. If we die inside their throat, and they choke on us forever. Bone furnace. All ahead full." The ship surged forward, her damaged engines screaming, her battered hull groaning, but moving, always moving. Behind us, the scattered remnants of the Armada tried to intercept, but they were too disorganized, too damaged, too slow, and too afraid of their own flagship's weapon to get close. The throne of Calith filled the view screen, its massive hull stretching across our entire field of vision as we closed the distance. The Void Hammer's assembly was visible now, a colossal structure mounted on the flagship's ventral hull, pulsing with energy that made the surrounding space shimmer and distort, as if reality itself was bending under the strain. At 15 seconds to contact range, the precursor components in our hull began to resonate. I felt it through the deck plating, through my chair, through my bones. A humming vibration that grew stronger with every meter we closed, intensifying as we approached the Void Hammer's energy field. The hull plating began to glow with patterns I had never seen before, not random scorching or heat signatures, structured patterns, geometric, precise, ancient. They traced lines across the ship's surface that looked like circuitry, like veins, like something that had been waiting to be activated for longer than any living species had existed. "Reza, what is happening to the ship?" "The precursor components are reacting to the Void Hammer's energy signature. They are resonating with it on a frequency that is not in any physics textbook I have ever seen. Commander, I believe these components were designed to interact with energy of this type. I believe they are part of the same technology. The Void Hammer is precursor technology. The Empire did not invent it. They found it, the same way we found our fragments, and they weaponized it, without understanding what it truly was. The void hammer fired. A column of energy erupted from the flagship's ventral assembly, a beam of pure destructive force wide enough to swallow a city, bright enough to sear the optical sensors of every ship in the sector. It struck the bone furnace head-on at point-blank range. And the bone furnace did not die. The precursor components, fully activated and resonating in harmony with the void hammer's output, did something that no living being in the galaxy understood. They caught the energy. They channeled it through the ship's frame, flowing through those ancient geometric patterns that now blazed across every surface of the hull. They amplified it, multiplied it, built it up like a wave gathering strength, and then they reflected it back along the exact same vector it had traveled, magnified beyond calculation. The throne of Calith, the Emperor's personal flagship, the physical symbol of 9,000 years of Vorath supremacy, detonated from the inside. Its own weapon, reflected and amplified 1,000-fold, tore through the vessel's core like a fist through glass. The explosion was cataclysmic. A sphere of white fire expanded outward from the flagship, engulfing nearby vessels, sending shockwaves rippling through the scattered armada. Dozens of warships were disabled by the blast wave alone. Others were thrown end over end, tumbling through space like leaves in a hurricane, their crews hurled from their stations, and their systems overloaded by the energy wash. The Emperor survived. I saw the emergency pod launch from the flagship's bridge section in the millisecond before the detonation reached it, a tiny capsule rocketing away from the dying vessel at maximum emergency thrust. Calith lived, but his flagship, the mightiest warship the galaxy had ever seen, was gone, reduced to an expanding cloud of debris and radiation and broken dreams. The bone furnace drifted. The precursor components had saved us from the void hammer's blast, channeling its killing energy around us rather than through us. But the strain of conducting that much power had burned out nearly every system on the ship. We had no weapons, minimal shields. Life support was failing on 3 decks. The reactor was barely holding, producing just enough power to keep the lights on and the air flowing. 11 of my 47 crew members were dead. We were broken, battered beyond any reasonable definition of functional. But we were alive. "Damage report," I said, and my voice sounded distant to my own ears, as if it belonged to someone standing far away. "Everything is damaged," Petra said quietly. She was bleeding from a deep cut above her left eye, and her console was cracked down the middle, held together by emergency clamps. Weapons are offline. Shields are at 6%. Hull integrity is at 41% across the board. We are venting atmosphere from 5 sections. Can we maneuver? Barely. Sublight engines at 12%. Hyperdrive is offline. We are not going anywhere fast. I looked at the view screen. The armada was in complete disarray. The flagship was a spreading field of wreckage and cooling plasma. Warships were retreating in every direction, their formations abandoned, their chain of command shattered, their confidence destroyed. The Emperor's escape pod was already surrounded by a protective escort of 3 destroyers, racing away from the battlefield at maximum speed. Running. The sovereign of the Vorath Empire was running. "Open a channel," I said. "Standard frequency. Widest broadcast range we can manage. Let everyone hear this." Sulo opened the channel with fingers that trembled just slightly, and I spoke to the galaxy. "This is Commander Idris Voss of the Bone Furnace. The Vorath flagship, the Throne of Calith, has been destroyed. The Emperor has fled. The evidence of the Empire's crimes against humanity and against the principles of galactic civilization is in your hands. What you do with it is your choice. But know this. Humanity was locked in a cage for 30 years. We were told we would never reach the stars. We were told we were too primitive, too weak, too small to matter. And we built a ship from your wreckage, crewed it with refugees, flew it into the heart of your empire, and broke your throne. We are 47 people. Imagine what we will be when there are millions of us. Imagine what we will build when we are free." I closed the channel and slumped back in my chair. Around me, the bridge was quiet, except for the hiss of atmosphere leaking through microfractures in the hull and the steady, soft beeping of damage alerts that no one had the energy to silence. Commander, Sulo said after a long, still moment. Multiple contacts approaching on long-range sensors. Non-imperial signatures. I tensed. We were in no condition to fight anyone else. If another hostile force was incoming, we were finished. We had nothing left, no weapons, no shields, no speed, just a hull that was barely holding together, and a crew that had given everything they had. Identification? Mixed Drin vessel signatures, Kethis. Several independent species I cannot identify. They are broadcasting on the neutral assistance frequency. He paused, his eyes scanning the data, and then he looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Something between wonder and disbelief and a fragile dawning hope. Commander, they are sending rescue ships. For us. The first vessel to reach us was a Drine cruiser, the Lasting Ember. Its captain, a scarred veteran who identified herself as Commander Senna Val, had been part of the Drine resistance decades ago, before the Empire crushed her people and scattered the survivors across the fringe. She had been watching the battle on the intercepted sensor feeds in real time, and she had mobilized every ship in her small fleet the moment the flagship exploded, pushing her engines to their maximum to reach us, before the Vorath could regroup. "Commander Voss," she said, when her face appeared on our cracked, flickering view screen, "I have waited my entire life to see the Empire bleed. My mother waited her entire life. My grandmother waited hers. 3 generations of my family lived and died believing it was impossible. You have proven us wrong." "We did not do this alone," I said. My voice was hoarse, my body exhausted, but I needed her to understand. The evidence we released came from Vorath defectors, from independent investigators, from scientists and soldiers who risked their lives and their families to preserve the truth about what happened at Kalen's Reach. We just delivered it in a way that was hard to ignore. You delivered it in a way the galaxy will never forget. A ship made of scrap, crewed by refugees who were never supposed to survive, destroying the Emperor's flagship with his own weapon. That is not just evidence, Commander. That is a story, and stories are what change empires. Evidence can be denied, data can be disputed, but a story that makes people feel something, that makes them believe something new about what is possible, that is a force that no fleet in the galaxy can stop. She was right. Over the next hours, as the Drin fleet and their allies towed the bone furnace to a safe harbor outside Imperial space, I watched the story spread across the galaxy like a sunrise. Every species with access to interstellar communications was carrying the footage. The image of the bone furnace, battered and burning and still flying, diving straight into the barrel of the Void Hammer, became the most widely distributed visual record in galactic history. It was viewed on 1 billion screens across thousands of worlds in a matter of hours. The political aftermath was seismic and immediate. The Galactic Neutral Assembly formally condemned the containment decree and demanded its immediate repeal by unanimous vote. 23 additional vassal states withdrew from imperial authority within the first day, their governors issuing public declarations that cited the evidence of the Empire's crimes and the moral impossibility of continuing to serve a regime built on lies and stolen technology. Military units across the outer provinces declared neutrality, their officers refusing to fight for an empire that had been exposed as a thief and a destroyer of innocent civilizations. Trade routes that had flowed through imperial space for centuries began to redirect toward independent networks. Sovereign Kalith, rescued by his escort fleet, retreated to a secondary military installation and issued a formal statement denouncing the bone furnace's broadcast as fabricated propaganda designed to destabilize galactic order, but the evidence was too detailed, too thoroughly documented, and too widely distributed to dismiss. Independent analysts from a dozen different species, including 3 former Vorath Imperial scientists who had defected, confirmed its authenticity within hours. The Empire's denial only made it look more guilty. The Empire was not going to fall overnight. It was still the most powerful military force in the galaxy, still in control of vast territory and enormous resources. Its fleet, though damaged and demoralized, still outnumbered any opposing force by orders of magnitude. But the myth of its invincibility was shattered beyond repair. The story of its benevolence and divine right was exposed as a lie, and the species it had spent millennia subjugating, conquering, silencing, and dismissing were beginning to stand up and speak. I walked the corridors of the bone furnace one last time, as the repair crews from the Dren fleet worked to stabilize our hull and restore basic life support. The ship was a wreck. Scorch marks and plasma burns covered every surface. Corridors were blocked by collapsed bulkheads and ruptured conduits. The air smelled like burned metal and ozone, and the bitter tang of leaking coolant. Every few steps I passed a section of wall that had buckled inward from weapons impacts, or a junction where emergency patches covered holes that had once opened directly to vacuum. But it was my ship. Our ship. Every damaged panel, every scorched weld, every impossible system that had held together just long enough to see us through, it was ours. We had built it from nothing, from scraps and salvage, and the stubborn refusal to accept that we had been beaten. We had flown it into the impossible, and it had brought us through to the other side. I reached the bridge. My surviving crew was gathered there, not because I had ordered it, but because there was nowhere else they wanted to be. 36 people out of 47. Petra, her head bandaged with a strip torn from her own uniform, sitting at her ruined console with quiet, unshakable dignity. Sulo, his hands finally still, reviewing the damage reports with the same calm focus he had brought to threading our ship through a fleet at combat speed. Reza, who had climbed up from engineering for the first time in what felt like days, leaning against the bulkhead with an exhaustion that went deeper than physical tiredness. The others, the welders and technicians, and salvagers and engineers, who had crewed the most improbable warship in galactic history. Nobody spoke. We looked at each other across the damaged bridge, across the consoles we had built ourselves, across the space where 11 of our people would never stand again. There were no speeches to give, no words that could add to what had already been done. We had done what we came to do. We had been seen, and the galaxy would never be the same. I sat down in my captain's chair and closed my eyes. The adrenaline was fading, draining out of me like water from a cracked vessel, and in its place was a bone-deep weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. 11 people were gone. 11 names I would carry for the rest of my life, etched into my memory, alongside the names of everyone we had lost at Kalen's Reach, alongside the names of everyone who had died in the Fringe, alongside the names of everyone humanity had lost to the Empire's cruelty. The cost of what we had done would never be cheap. I would never pretend it was. I would never let anyone else pretend it was. A chime from the communications console pulled me back from the edge of sleep. Sulo frowned at his display, his brow furrowing in a way that told me he was seeing something unexpected. Commander, incoming transmission. The origin point is the Sol system. I opened my eyes. The Sol system, Earth. The place humanity had been locked away for 30 years, caged behind the containment decree's military blockade. No one was supposed to be able to transmit anything out. The Imperial blockade fleet maintained a constant jamming field across every frequency band. Nothing was supposed to get through. How? I asked. I do not know. The signal is extremely weak, barely above background noise. It was threaded through a gap in the jamming frequencies that should not exist, using a modulation pattern I have never seen before. But the encoding is unmistakable. Standard Earth communication protocols. Human origin. No question. Let me hear it. The message was short. Just 5 words, transmitted in a human voice I did not recognize, crackling with static and distance, and the faint distortion of having traveled through a jamming field that should have been impenetrable. But the words were clear. We are building more. We are coming. I sat in the captain's chair of the bone furnace, surrounded by the wreckage of victory, and I let those 5 words wash over me like a wave. Somewhere behind the Imperial blockade, on a world the Empire had tried to forget, humanity had heard us. They had intercepted our broadcast, or they had seen the sensor feeds, or they had somehow received the evidence we had transmitted, and they were not sitting still. They were not waiting to be rescued. They were not hoping for the galaxy to save them. They were building. Petra looked at me across the bridge, the bandage over her eye stained red, her expression carrying a fierce, quiet intensity that I had seen in her eyes since the day I met her, the day she was 9 years old and covered in the ash of her destroyed home. They are coming, she said. They are coming, I confirmed, and the galaxy is not ready for what happens next. The Empire spent 30 years making sure humanity would never reach the stars. They locked us in our home system. They burned our colonies. They killed our families. They erased our name from the records and classified us as primitives who would never amount to anything. And all they accomplished, the only thing they truly achieved with all their power and all their cruelty, was giving us a reason to learn, a reason to build, a reason to refuse, with every fiber of our being, to stay where we had been put. We taught ourselves to fly using their own wreckage. We built a weapon from their own garbage. We flew it into the heart of their empire and broke the throne they had sat on for 9,000 years. And now, behind the blockade they thought was unbreakable, the rest of our species was waking up. The galaxy wanted to know if the bone furnace was really a human warship, if what they were seeing on their sensors was real, if it was truly possible that a species they had written off as primitive and contained had built something that could challenge the most powerful empire in existence. It was real, every bolt, every weld, every impossible system held together by human stubbornness and human ingenuity, and the kind of defiant, furious hope that you can only understand if you have lost everything and chosen to build again anyway. And it was just the beginning.